fans? Welcome back to Jay vs. Horror. I'm your host, Jay Wall. And today, guys, we're going to be talking about a Serbian film. That's right. This is hardcore horror reviews, and we've done a lot of these episodes exploring the most traumatic horror films made across the world. And we held off on this one for a great deal of time because I really wanted to find out as much as I could about this film. Try to look under all the rocks and all that stuff and get all the information I could because it's such a polarizing film. I mean, some people love this film, some people hate it, and there seems to be really no in between. I've never heard anyone say, it was okay. But, so let's get started. Let's talk about a Serbian film. It's, of course, a 2010 Serbian exploitation horror film produced and directed by Sardan Spasovic in his feature film debut. Spasovic also co-wrote the film with Alexandra Razdivovic. It tells the story of a financially struggling porn star who agrees to participate in an art film only to discover that he has been drafted into a snuff film with pedophilic and necrophilic themes. The film stars Serbian actors Sardan Todorovic and Sergej Trifunovic. So those are interesting names. All those names end with a C. But upon its debut on the art film circuit, the film received substantial attention and controversy for its graphic violence and sexual content. The film has been banned in many countries around the world, including Spain, Australia, New Zealand, Malaysia, Singapore, Norway, and was even temporarily banned from screenings in Brazil. The film follows Milos, who is a retired porn star who gets back into the game to try to make some money for his family. But when Milos discovers the dark nature of what he's gotten himself into, he tries to back out, only to be drugged by the film's producers and director. The drug that he's given is like a hyper Viagra. It makes him super sexually aggressive and also makes him very suggestive. So then the director can just give him instructions and Milos will follow them blindly because his mind is now a complete blank slate. Once Milos sobers up, he is able to find the tapes of what's been going on, and he is horrified by his own actions, only to be captured again and forced into even more horrendous sex acts. The film is a hard watch, that's for damn sure. I saw it for the first time about 10 years ago, and I was a little taken aback, I have to admit, like most people who have seen this film. It really did shock me when I first saw it. However, before I get into my review here, my thoughts on the film, I'd like to take a second to just talk about its overall impact and some of the themes behind the film and what the director has suggested these themes actually mean. So, unless you've been living under a rock, you understand that the film is hyper-violent, especially sexually. It contains themes of rape, sexual assault, and of course, pedophilia. I think there are mainly 3 scenes that kind of broach the subject of pedophilia that truly bother people in this movie. Now, Sardan Spasovic has stated that the film is a parody of modern politically correct films made in Serbia, which are financially supported by foreign funds. When asked why they chose the title Srpski film or a Serbian film, the makers responded with this quote, "We have become synonyms for chaos and lunacy. The title is a cynical reference to that image. Srpski film is also a metaphor for our national cinema, boring, predictable, and altogether unintentionally hilarious, which throughout our film, to some extent, is commented on and subtly parodied." They also refer to Serbian cinema in general as pathetic state-financed films made by people who have no sense or connection to film, but are strongly supported by foreign funds. Quality of the film is not their concern, only the bureaucratic upholding of the rule book on political correctness. According to Spasovic, the character of Vukmir, the film's prime antagonist, is an exaggerated representation of the new European film order. In Eastern Europe, you cannot get your film financed unless you have a barefoot girl who cries on the streets or some story about war victims in our region. The Western world has lost its feelings, so they're searching for false ones. They want to buy our feelings. In yet another interview, Spasovic is quoted as saying the film denounces the fascism of political correctness. Questioned by the Croatian media on whether the violence depicted deals with crimes committed by Serbian soldiers during the Yugoslav wars, Spasovic answered, Srpski film does not touch upon war themes, but in a metaphorical way deals with the consequences of post-war society and a man that is exploited to the extreme in the name of securing the survival of his family. So in essence, I feel like Spasovic is saying here that the film is a satire of the entire film industry, especially the one in his country. And he's also been quoted as saying, this is a diary of our own molestation by the Serbian government. It's about the monolithic power of leaders who hypnotize you to do things you don't want to do. You have to feel the violence to know what it's all about. And I feel like what he's saying there also is that sometimes people don't listen. You can talk to your blue in the face and they'll never listen to anything you have to say unless you slap them hard first. And then they're a little more willing to listen in some cases. I do, however, find his comments to be a little contradictory. I mean, in some cases he refers to his film as a parody, and in other cases he wants it to be taken seriously to the point of not being questioned. So just to be fair and to present some opposing viewpoints here, there are some of Spasovic's own countrymen who do not approve of this film. In an interview, Serbian actor and film director Dragan Bejovic criticized the film, calling it shallow and plain wrong. Sum up my feelings about this movie: I have a problem with the Serbian film, its director in particular. I've got a serious problem with a boy whose father got wealthy during the 1990s. Nothing against making money, but we all know how that money was made in Serbia during the 1990s. And then his father pays for his son's education abroad, and eventually the kid comes back to Serbia to film his view of the country using his father's money, and even has the audacity to call the entire thing a Serbian film. To me, that's a metaphor for something unacceptable. The second generation comes back to the country and, using the money that was robbed from the people of Serbia, smears the very same people by portraying them as the worst scum of the earth. You know, when the first generation of the Rockefellers finished robbing America, the second one built museums, galleries, charitable organizations, and financed America. But in Serbia, we're seeing every segment of society continually being taken apart, and for some, this movie is a paradigm of that. I've never met this kid, and I really don't want to, since that meeting wouldn't be pleasant at all. So those are pretty strong words coming from his own countrymen. And, not living in Serbia and not being familiar with the entire situation that has taken place there, other than some of the aspects of war and genocide that occurred during the 1990s, I can only take these men's words as the truth, at least as far as the way they feel. So, how do I feel about a Serbian film? Well, technically I think it's a very good film. I think the direction is solid. I also think the acting is great, and I remember the first time I saw this, that the initial thing that stuck with me was, how has no one done this yet? And people have, but in other ways. People have made movies about snuff films, but I've never seen a movie on this level where they showed a struggling porn star getting back into the business who was then taken advantage of. And it seems like such prime stomping ground for extreme horror content, right? Now, years later, I did see Life and Death of a Porno Gang, which was actually made a couple years before a Serbian film, and it also kind of has that feel. And like I said, there are other films about snuff films out there, but I don't think anything really takes it to the level of a Serbian film. So I may have answered my own question after thinking about that, right? Why hasn't this been done to this level before? Because no one's been willing to go to this level to do this before. Now, addressing the violence in the film and the pedophilia and the sexual assault and just the horrible acts that are committed on film here, I have to say I understand some of Spasovic's comments about it being parody. Some of the effects are done so bad that it's almost like they want you to know that they're not real. Do I consider it to be over the top? Well, of course. I mean, isn't that the point of the entire thing? I mean, they're obviously going for that. Even if they say, look, we didn't make it violent because we wanted to make a violent film that would sell, I still think that that's a contradiction, because you can't have all these political ideas in there that you're enforcing through, extreme violence, and then say that you didn't make the film violent just to sell it on violence. Myself personally, I don't believe in censorship of any kind. I don't have a problem with the ratings that they put on movies as kind of a guide to show people what might be in the film. And if they don't want to see it, that's a great way to decide whether they want to see it or not. But actually banning something, no, I'm against that. I do believe that that is fascism. And I think it's wrong to censor art in any form. Unless, of course, we're talking about someone's real life, something that's actually being filmed that's happening to someone. That's not art. That is reality being put on display for exploitation. I think films like the Serbian film are very necessary because they give society that litmus test. Can you take this? If not, what is your response? Do you destroy it? Or do you simply go out and say, this is something that I don't approve of, that's not for me? There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with hating this film. I would say there's something wrong with hating people who don't hate it, though. And I see a lot of that on social media. I see a lot of people, attacking other people for not hating the film. I hate it because it's this and this and that. You should hate it too. That's not the way life works, though. We have to give each other our own standing, our own viewpoints. Otherwise, we all simply become clones of each other. Just manufactured paper cutouts of what human beings are supposed to be. Okay, so now it's time for some honesty. I've only seen this film once, really. Well, I'll say once and a half, if that counts, okay? I saw it when it was released in 2010, and I'll never forget it because I got a copy of this movie from a friend who was telling me, oh, you got to see this, it's insane. And I also had rented a copy that day of Fright Night, the remake. And I watched Fright Night, the remake first with the girlfriend, and, that went off without a hitch. Not that I was the hugest fan of that. I didn't hate it. But, it seemed like a typical movie night. And then she went off to bed, and I started a Serbian film. Now, about halfway through this movie, I stopped it. I got very nervous about the FBI coming into my house just because of what I was seeing. But that's when I first researched the film, and, I wanted to know that nothing I was seeing on screen was real. And the more I read about how, they wanted it to seem like parody, the more I could see that the effects were bad on purpose and things like that. And so I went ahead and continued with the film, and it didn't get any better from there. It actually got much, much worse. As everyone knows, if you've seen it, or even if you haven't seen it, probably at this point you know where the film goes. But, when it was over with, I was done. I didn't feel like I ever needed to see it again. Now, I had someone a few years later tell me that they wanted to see it really bad. I still had that copy that the friend had given me. And so I put it on, and it started. It played for about 10 minutes. I really enjoyed the music in this. I love the techno music in this. But, once it started, it's so uncomfortable to watch this movie alone. Why would you want to watch it with anyone else? It's one of those movies that as soon as you're done watching, you feel like you need to, go take a shower or something and be left alone to your own thoughts about how terrible what you just witnessed was. But at the same time, I do have a great appreciation for this film. Like I said, I think it's technically very well done. I honestly do consider it to even be one of the top 10 films of 2010. And to be honest, what bothers me the most about a Serbian film, and what should, in my opinion, bother people the most about a Serbian film, is the last scene of the movie where the family is overcome with grief and they are forced to commit suicide because they can't even look at each other anymore after what's happened. And then we see that even more bad guys come into their house with the intention of raping their dead bodies. And the main bad guy in this sequence says, start with the little one. And that just tore me apart for some reason. Because I got it in that moment, I think that it was like, I hate to use expletives here, but, they screwed them to death, and that wasn't even good enough. They needed to further humiliate them and further violate them. And, that's what bothered me the most about the whole thing. I mean, a lot of the rest of it seemed fake to me, and thank God. I mean, there's even some, it's hard to believe, but there's some comedic stuff in this film. I mean, anytime you see a guy take his, 11-inch penis, or however long it is, and shove it into someone's eye socket until they're dead, or, there's comedic aspects there, because those things are not exactly, possible even in real life. But and it seems odd to even get the smallest laugh out of this film, right? But if you truly break the film down, there are even comedic aspects in it that go over the top, just like the violent aspects of the film. So, all in all, guys, for me, a Serbian film, it gets an 8 out of 10. I think it's a well made film and it provides a lot of conversation for topics that do need to be talked about in Serbia as well as the United States and all over the world. I can also say that it's the only film I've ever given 8 out of 10 that I can promise you I have no intention of ever watching again. Guys, let's take a look at the trailer for the infamous Serbian film.
Slušaj me pažljivo. Sprema se nešto veliko.
Ti si porno glumac koji želi da zna o čemu se radi u filmu. Pružit ću ti kraj. Kraj kakav si žela.
Bravo, bravo, bravo.
All right, horror fans, that's all we've got for this episode. Now, we're going to do a few more of these hardcore horror film reviews. To be honest with you guys, I took a break on them because I spent about 3 weeks just watching hardcore horror films from all around the world that I hadn't seen, and I'd already seen a great majority of them, or thought I had, until I went on this little adventure. So yeah, we're going to be doing some more of the hardcore horror reviews, maybe even a couple in the next few days. So stay tuned, like and subscribe, and check out all the other hardcore horror film reviews we've done. And we promise that we'll try to not make you want to pull your own eyeballs out. And guys, we will talk to you the next time we've got something worth talking about. Bye.